Welcome back to Extra Literary Affairs, a podcast for the lit curious reader, because why not read a little of everything? I'm Joey Kelly.
I'm Jennifer Smith.
And today we're having an affair with Walter Isaacson and his nonfiction work, The Greatest Sentence Ever Written, timed to the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence signed in Philadelphia on July 4th, 1776, obviously our Independence Day. So it's a short book of essays, as well as primary source material, including Thomas Jefferson's rough draft with Benjamin Franklin's edits, the final declaration, and excerpts from the philosophers who influenced the founders, which I did find to be very interesting because I did not know that part. So this is our final episode of our month-long examination of the United States for its 250th birthday, which has centered around the Declaration of Independence and three different pieces of literary works from different authors and different eras that helped us explore some fundamental ideas about what it means to be an American.
And some contradictions, Joey. Today, we are going to go directly to the source. We normally don't read nonfiction here and discuss it, so this was quite a departure for us, but I think it was a really compelling book for me. It's not fiction, it's not a made-up story, it is a living historical document. 35 words that someone, somewhere, a group of men, decided would serve as the philosophical foundation of our new country. They were embarking on an experiment. They were breaking up with the King of England. They were writing the Dear John letter, or Dear George in this case. So let me read the final version of what was sent. Here we go. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, we have been talking about this all month. You've heard it in school. You've heard it on the news. You've probably been, you've been familiar with this text probably the entirety of your life. It's the second sentence of the Declaration of Independence, and Walter Isaacson calls it the greatest sentence ever written. That's the premise of his book. And today we're going to ask, does that concept still hold after everything we've read this month? Does this leave us with optimism? Are we pessimistic? Where are we going? So who is Walter Isaacson? I was introduced to him on a workshop event where I heard him speak about his book, and I was very compelled to find out more and to read the book. So that was very effective. Walter Isaacson is what you would call maybe America's biographer. He has written major biographies of Benjamin Franklin, Albert Einstein, Steve Jobs, Leonardo da Vinci. His subject is genius and what that is, who possesses it, what do they do with it, and what does a genius owe society. So it's no surprise that he wrote this book examining a very consequential sentence and idea that was put forth 250 years ago. He's also a native of New Orleans, which I thought was interesting. He started out as a journalist at a local paper, became eventually the editor of Time magazine, and then eventually after that became the chairman of CNN. So a son of the South writing about the sentence that promised equality to the people his city notoriously enslaved and was a hub of the human slavery trade back in the day. He was awarded, and an interesting twist, Joey, a man is not his city. He was awarded the National Humanities Medal in 2023 for his journalism, for the books that he has put forth. This book feels like it is the capstone of his career. It is all of this information that he's been amassing his entire life, I think, comes to bear in this very, very short work. And I really am happy that he put this out in time for us to read it before the 250th commemoration of the Declaration of Independence.
Okay, so now that we know a little bit more about the author, Walter Isaacson, let me give you a synopsis of what this story is, or what this book is about, because as we said, it's called The Greatest Sentence Ever Written, and it's structured as a close reading of that specific sentence and feels a bit more like a poem under a microscope where we have done that before. We've broken down verses of poetry or entire poems, so we are well acquainted with doing that. So he breaks his analysis into 7 chapters, which are each devoted to a fragment of the sentence. The book traces how the founders of the United States drew on Enlightenment philosophy to build a new kind of nation grounded in reason rather than religious authority, or the religion was included, and on the ideas of social contract and common ground, which I stand by. Isaacson moves through the Enlightenment thinkers who shaped the sentence, Locke, Hume, and Rousseau, but he never gets lost in abstraction. The philosophy is always in the service of the words on the page.
So, Joey, most importantly to me, Isaacson does not downplay what he calls the moral contradiction that is at the center of his book, which is also the moral contradiction of the document of the Declaration of Independence. Jefferson himself enslaved hundreds of people, yet called slavery a cruel war against human nature in his first draft of the Declaration of Independence. So he was doubling down on slavery should not be in America in 1776. The founders consciously and intentionally excluded women, Native Americans, enslaved people. Sometimes the poor white men were also not invited to participate in this. It was a very exclusionary we. And Isaacson names it and he holds it. He just states the fact. And the final chapters zoom out from that founding principle to this idea of common ground. What can we still do together? We share values, I think. And his chapter, Joanne, I think you're going to talk about this, the idea of the American dream. He makes the case that each generation should have the conditions to do better than the last, that for almost the entirety of our nation's history, the generation before set things up so the generation coming would inherit a better society with more resources and opportunity. And it feels like, unfortunately, Joey, your generation is not reaping the rewards of what was sown 50 years ago. And for that, I apologize. So whether this is actually going to work out, this is what we have been examining this entire month of July.
What I found to be really interesting about this was that I wasn't aware of sort of the drafting process of the Declaration of Independence, and I didn't know that there was such an emphasis on the word selection. And one of the biggest ones, I think, is from sacred to self-evident, because as I sort of put in there as an aside in the opening here, was that religion was included. It was different types of religion like deism, which was interesting because I did not know that that was associated with anyone at this time. But I think that change in particular is fascinating, why they decided to do that specifically.
Yeah, Jerry, I agree with you. And Isaacson really sets us up with a beautiful scene about exactly as you described, who is deciding what words get used and what doesn't. And the greatest sentence ever written, which is Isaacson's premise, almost didn't get written that way. It almost said something completely different. And so he starts us out by saying, we hold these truths to be sacred. Sacred? No, that doesn't sound right. But that's how Thomas Jefferson wrote it in his first draft. Benjamin Franklin, who was on the 5-person drafting committee with his friend Thomas Jefferson, crossed out the word sacred using the heavy backslash marks he had often used as a printer and wrote in self-evident. The declaration they were writing was intended to herald a new type of nation, one in which our rights are based on reason and not the dictates of dogma or religion. And then he had another set of edits because they invoke the word creator. And Joey, you mentioned, it's like there is religion in this document, but it was also in some ways toned down. They did not say God. They said creator. So that sort of opened up a larger interpretation, which I thought was interesting. And Jefferson wrote that men are created equal, and from that equal creation, they derive rights. That phrase was crossed out. This time, a different pen was in the hand of someone else and replaced with endowed by their creator with rights. And Isaacson points out something that I didn't really know. I have not studied Thomas Jefferson as much as I would hope, that he was very skeptical. He had some skeptical reviews on religion. He was a deist, as you had mentioned, and it doesn't seem like that was a phrase he would have used. So they suggested that John Adams, who had more traditional and conventional religious views, he's like, I'm going to make that change. And Joey, I cannot imagine, even you and I trying to work on a piece of literature together, cannot agree on what gets edited, what goes in, what gets taken out. And now we have 5 gentlemen who are about to overthrow the ruler of their colonies and start something totally new. So I was like, good job. Committees sometimes work. That really surprised me. And so, as you know, the sentence, and I'm going to say it again because it is so good, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And this unalienable versus inalienable debate continues. In one place it's carved in stone, in another place it's on the parchment. So we're going to use the Shakespearean anything goes, whatever version you'd like to stick in there, we'll just let it go. And Joey, when I read that first sentence, to me it felt like, I know we read a lot of speculative fiction, but I was thinking, what happened if those 5 men were not the 5 men that got on the committee? What if they drew straws and you had John Hancock in there and some other people? It's like, would our nation have survived? Would they have landed on these topics? And for me, I just really love thinking about the coincidences and the conditions of these historical events. Things sort of had to go down in this way because if they had been different, we would be different. And so I just really appreciated that. And, sacred is not the same as self-evident. And using this very logical way of looking at the world instead of divine providence, I think was really impactful. And I appreciate that. The word sacred is a religious claim. It says these truths come from God. You got to take them on faith. There's no way to prove them. Just trust us. We've got this. Self-evident is a rational claim. It says these truths are so obvious. It's so open to human reach. No one needs to be convinced. These are self-evident. And yet we've spent 250 years trying to convince people that we are all equal under the eyes of the government. And I just thought that was really quite interesting.
Yeah, you could replace self-evident with common sense. So we hold these truths to be common sense. It's the same thing. Or you could say it's the same thing. It's interesting that still today, in the year of our Lord 2026, that we are still debating what does the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution, what are these things actually saying, and how can we use it to either, well, mostly oppress and suppress people, but can we use it and reinterpret it in different ways to make people's lives better? We're still talking about it. I don't know. We haven't decided. I think it's mostly a negative thing. I think the founders' very selective word choices made a lot of sense after reading this collection of essays. I'm a little pessimistic about it at this point. While I was reading it, I was just like, I don't know, man. Like, I get where you were going, but like, not working out, guys. Like you founded a country based on slavery and genocide of Native Americans. Like it wasn't ever going to be a great thing on the backs of that.
And completely ignoring it, right? When certain people said, let's put this in here. And they're like, nope, you are outvoted. I think he said, the majority of the men who signed the Declaration of Independence were active slave holders. And they're like, don't even think you're taking away my property at this moment. That is a non-starter. And Joey, when I think about our current political divide and polarization, and I think that there's just like a lot of animosity and difficulty in the United States at this present moment, trying to figure out who are we together? Who do we want to be together? Do we want to break up? Do we want to go forward? What do we stand for? Reading about the founding fathers and knowing they also were divided. They also weren't completely in alignment of where they needed to go. They're like, we need to make some compromises because we're definitely breaking up with England. And if we don't get ourselves together, this is never going to stick. And so I really appreciated that aspect. And I was a little hopeful. Was there anything that gave you hope, Joey?
I think the section about common ground was really interesting to me. And I think this is a conversation that is happening more and more, at least that I'm aware of right now, because you could think of common ground as a third space. That's basically what they were trying to say. So libraries were and still are a third space. And what I mean by that, in case anyone's not aware, is a space that you can go to as a citizen of the United States in this case, or a person that lives in a specific town or district or something like that, can go and access a space for free. There's no entry fee other than like tax money, but okay, that we're going to pretend that it's free basically. So a library is funded through our tax money, of course, and it's a space that it's an equalizer. So let me read one of the quotes because I thought it was really poignant.
And Joey, just for people who are not familiar with the third space, the first one is home, the second one is work, and the third one is these public gathering areas where you can have the freedom to assemble and be.
Exactly, yes. So we need third spaces or common grounds, as he says. So Isaacson writes that the library served as a commons where both tradesmen and wealthy merchants would come to read books. The spread of such libraries, Benjamin Franklin later wrote, made our common tradesmen and farmers as intelligent as most gentlemen from other countries. So this is a really like equalizing space, as I said. So it doesn't matter your socioeconomic background. You can enter a library, check out the same exact book in that case, but now you can still do that, but you can use a computer lab. You can check out puzzles. I've never done that at the library, but I know you could do that. You can use one of their working spaces and reserve it. It doesn't matter how much money is in your bank account. It could be a lot or it could be a negative. You could have overdrafted. It doesn't matter. You're still allowed and welcomed there. And I think that's why we can see that currently in this administration, an attack on not only education, but these public spaces and libraries in particular, where they don't want to fund this type of thing because, as Benjamin Franklin wrote, this is a space where the average American can come in and become educated. All they have to do is come with the ability to read, or they don't even need to be able to read. You could learn to read at the library. There's kids sections. You could literally work your way up with your literacy. I think our current government now sees that libraries are sort of dangerous for when you want to control a population, because that's where knowledge is coming from. And so I think you can see that there's a lot of animosity towards education in the United States.
Because what other explanation could we come up with for why public libraries, underscore the word public, are being underfunded, are being closed, are being restricted? I think back to the 1800s when Carnegie, a huge titan of industry, decided, because he came from very limited means and was able to raise himself up through his own hard work, but also the circumstances that existed for exploitation to gain all this wealth. He was like, I don't need to keep all this wealth. I should be funding libraries. And in the hometown where I grew up in Adrian, Michigan, they have a Carnegie library. And my father went there as a child, and it's now our historical museum. But it was like, he's like, Jennifer, do you know Andrew Carnegie came into all of these small towns and built public libraries because he cared so much about the people of this country that he was like, I have the money. Why wouldn't I spend it to help other people? And I think that's just such a contrast, Joey, to what many of us are experiencing now, looking at billionaires and trillionaires and quadrillionaires. I don't know if there's a new word that they've invented for some of this wealth, that I don't feel personally enriched, societally included in the proceeds of their riches. And that's just something I've really been reflecting on. But because we have libraries and because people were given knowledge, we had the civil rights movement. Women wanted the right to vote. Like all of these things that certain people don't think are great ideas. Like, man, don't let them read. They're going to get some ideas and maybe we won't be in charge anymore. That would be horrible.
Yeah, if you want to be a rebellious person, read a book. They're talking about private property in this case, because of course, wealthy people hoard wealth and they hoard property. Not just like homes, but actual land. There's this thing called the Lockean Proviso that is like the answer to wealth. Like you can have as much as you want, but there has to be enough left over that is just as good as what you have, but it has to be for the collective, for common grounds. And we can see that we have absolutely went the other way on this one. We did not keep that philosophy in mind. We do still have libraries, but third spaces they're erased for the most part. There's really no other places to congregate on like a daily basis. Usually people like will go to a coffee shop or something. And that's obviously, as we said, as you mentioned, you listed all the types of spaces. That is not a third space. I just feel like The United States has always been a corporation and has continued to be ran as a business and a corporation.
I am very hopeful about that, Joey, because I was also thinking about this idea of what is owed to future generations. What does the Declaration of Independence mean when it says, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? All men are created equal and are given certain gifts by their creator, like words to that effect. What is that for? So thinking about prominent people who have speeches on record that reference directly back to the Declaration of Independence, I'm thinking of Frederick Douglass, Abraham Lincoln, and Martin Luther King. And Frederick Douglass quoted it, an 1852 speech, which was entitled, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July?" And at that time, that was a very poignant question because we had not entered the Civil War yet. There was a lot of tension building. Douglass turned the sentence directly back onto his audience, and he said, "You declare before the world and are understood by the world to declare that you hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and yet you hold securely in bondage a seventh part of the inhabitants of your country." And he's like, I'm not celebrating. We shouldn't be celebrating Independence Day if we are enslaving other human beings in the country that says it's like the land of the free. Okay, I get that. And then Abraham Lincoln in 1863 at the Gettysburg Address, which the Civil War is well underway at this point, he starts the very, very famous and short speech that says, "47 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal." He name checks, right, the nation's birth, 1776, but he's not talking about the Constitution. He's really talking about the independence that was declared, making the idea of breaking away, starting something new, making this available for everyone, integral to the way in which we see ourselves. And finally, Joey, we're going to skip ahead literally 100 years with Martin Luther King and his "I Have a Dream" speech, where he says that the Declaration is a promissory note, that we were promised certain things as a nation that came together in common to throw off the monarchy and to be ruled independently with our peers, and that's not working out. And so he wrote, "When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note." And near the end of the speech, very famously, I think most school children will have heard these words, "I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, and that all men are created equal." And Joey, just like reading that, I have goosebumps and I'm getting emotional thinking, okay, that was 1963. That was a very long time ago. I think we still are striving towards this goal and we keep falling short. And these words were not words of comfort. These were words of a demand. Hello, United States. You started out with a great idea and you have missed the mark. Do you want to regroup and try again? Because I think that's what we need to do. It doesn't end the argument. It just keeps reopening it. And the choice, Joey, and I'll just say this, the choice of what was left in and left out of the Declaration of Independence was not a mistake. It was not an accident. It was a plan. It was the people in power making compromises to move the needle forward with the idea, and this is something we talked about last week, in the Declaration of Independence, it says, if the government is no longer working for those who have consented to be governed, change it. That's what we're trying to do. Change it. Make it work. And so, Joey, just to build on that, The founders knew exactly what they were writing. 41 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence owned slaves at the time that they signed the Declaration. Women had no political standing for a very long time after that. Native Americans were not in the room. The exclusions were not oversights, they were definitive choices. The tension that has been created, Isaacson does a great job of explaining in his book. He calls the sentence powerful because it names a young nation's aspirations, not its realities. It is a promissory note, not a receipt. Which turns us right back to our series, Joey, that we made a lot of promises and we weren't able to fulfill all of them yet.
Yeah, it sure was just like an IOU, basically, and not like, okay, we guarantee this. And I think that that's part of American propaganda growing up, for me at least, is that who's gonna say how many of those men owned slaves and made this? They were trying to free themselves from an oppressive system and a monarchy, and then they come here and say like, well, we wanted that, and since like we're in power and we have all the wealth, like, so we get that, but like you don't get that. And we can still see how that works today. And I think Frederick Douglass, who I absolutely love, and I love his writing, I think his narrative, his autobiography is fantastic and everyone should read it, especially to my fellow Americans. You should read it. That his idea of like, why would enslaved people celebrate the 4th of July, an Independence Day that did not free them? That's stupid, you guys.
Like, what
read
a
the
joke.
room. Yeah, read the room, you guys, because no, obviously we're not celebrating that. And I think that this concept still applies to the United States today. I think you can see, obviously everyone knows that the United States is very divided, okay? It was pretty strongly. But I think you can see people who are really excited to celebrate the 250th anniversary or birthday of the United States. And you can see people going like, this is not the time. Sorry, America. I'll catch you next time. But it like this, we're having a bad time over here. So like there are people who are literally locked up and who are facing slave-like conditions, who are working for almost literally almost nothing or nothing. Even in New Jersey at Delaney Hall, there's been a ton of protests, rightfully so, because the conditions for undocumented immigrants who are being held there are abysmal. They're disgusting. This is not the time to celebrate like our nation when our nation is doing this type of thing. So I'm with you, Frederick Douglass, all right?
Joey, can I just add one thing to that? You just really sparked something for me. All of the people who were in the room signing the Declaration of Independence in Philadelphia, 1776, they were not native born to this country from native peoples. Everyone came in. And so when we're talking about what's going on with our immigration system right now and how exclusionary we're being and
they're
all of
immigrants.
this birthright citizenship and all of the stuff that's like constantly being debated, I'm like, I thought we already settled this. Like, I don't know, maybe 250 years ago, like we made an agreement. This was how it was going to go. Wait, now it's time for a revision. So Joey, just thank you for taking us back to that contemporary moment of we all came from somewhere. And how dare we at this moment say, well, it was okay for me and my family to come, but now we're full. We're closed. I'm sorry. You don't look like me, so there's no room.
That's what's happening is we were a nation. Well, we were invaders. Okay. If you're white, you were an invader, basically. Not basically, that's what happened. And so you were a nation of immigrants who now demonizes immigrants. Make that make sense. That math ain't mathin'.
So much, Joey, for the American dream. And do you want to talk to us about the American dream?
I think as you said at the beginning, millennials were promised and then did not get any of the stuff that they're promised, which is work hard, go to school, dedicate yourself to a company or some type of corporation, and they will take care of you because you'll take care of them. And that is not what happened, okay? We were given incredible amounts of debt from student loans because it's extremely expensive to go to school. And now our current government is trying to dissuade people from going to college. Like, oh no, don't worry about that. You don't need that. Meanwhile, the richest amongst us are still sending their stupid kids who can't get into schools, but can pay their way for sure to get into these places But Isaacson spends some time talking about meritocracy, which has come up recently with this administration, saying that we want everything to be merit-based, ignoring the fact that nepotism is the leading cause of all bullshit. In the United States, the pursuit of higher education is a piece of meritocracy in the United States, led to offshoring jobs, closing factories, and having immigrants to do low-paying work, which was meant to fuel economic growth, but led to the system which disenfranchised 62% of Americans who never went or finished college. What I also thought was sort of strange is that he's not citing where he's getting these statistics from. I don't know if maybe he does it at the back. I don't think so. There's no footnote. There's no annotation to say that he's doing that, which I kind of, it feels kind of sus to me when a nonfiction book does not cite where it's getting its information from. I'm not saying that he's trying to lead us astray. I just was like, why are you saying that?
I want to see the report.
Yeah. Show your work, sir. Okay. I found sources that were pretty close. Not exactly that, but I think it depends on the source that you're going to. You're going to get a variety. It depends on who is in, who they're asking, basically.
What angle are they trying to prove with their data?
Yeah. I don't think that he was trying to, like I said, mislead us. I think it just depends on what source he was. I would have appreciated getting the source. But according to census.gov, that number is closer, not 62, but 56% of Americans as of 2025. Obviously, they cannot get that in 2026 because it's not over yet. So but what I think is really interesting is that he wrote that if you go to school, you will be a part of this meritocracy and you will get the most benefit. You will earn the most money. You will get the best job, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And that is not happening. That's not happening. Sorry, Walter Isaacson, I don't care. You are wrong. Because maybe it's anecdotal. Maybe it's anecdotal to me, but I am not seeing the benefit of us going to college and being strapped with enormous debt. It's basically impossible these loans are predatory. So there's no way you're going to pay off. You're always paying off interest and the interest accrues so quickly. But anyway, so Isaacson writes that people can buy a flat screen television very cheaply at Walmart on a Sunday night, but on Monday morning, they were no longer able to take the bus to a job at a local factory. Their grandparents on a single income could have a house, a car, two or three kids, but they can't even afford a house. So, sort of true. Okay, you had me sort of, but I think, I don't know, maybe it's just me, okay, you could tell me, Jennifer, if you think it's just me, that I think he is saying that the average American is financially irresponsible and would go to Walmart, I don't know why Walmart, and buy a TV, they're all flat screen, Isaacson, please, okay, we don't have fatback TVs anymore, and forego saving enough money for themselves for the week to get to work. I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue is that they cannot afford to pay for gas or the transportation. Our transportation system in the United States is shit. Okay, it's bad compared to all the other countries that you can compare us to economically. And he is correct in saying that, yes, we cannot buy houses, but that is besides the point. Many millennials, including myself, have been like, I'll never afford a fucking house. That's never going to happen. They are way too expensive. Okay, so now it's at the point, it's like, can I even pay for rent?
Yeah. So, Joey, I had a very different interpretation of the sentence that you read. How I took that from Isaacson's point, which has sort of reflected my own experience, I believe what he was saying is that because of the global economy, because of the exploitation of other countries and their labor population, you can go to Walmart and buy a $350 flat screen TV when, we'll say in 2010, that same flat screen TV was $500, $600, $800, right? The prices continually come down. But when he says, but you can't take the bus to your job, there's no public transportation because the governments are not making enough money and don't want to support public transportation. And secondly, you know why you can't go to your job on Monday? Because you don't have a job, because all of those jobs have left. And that is the point that I think he was making from my interpretation of you can buy cheap goods and think that you're living this luxurious and affluent life, but you don't have the basic services, as you said, in the Netherlands, in Denmark, in Canada, in other places, to be able to get on public transportation, have this safety net, to be socially embraced. That was the point I was thinking he was making, Joey. But I did think specifically of you and your generation, because you could be my child, that the opportunities I had 20 years prior to your birth are not the opportunities that you had. You were born during a time, we had the Great Recession and the explosion of the housing cost. And it's like, how is this going to work out for you? Not just you, but like the big you, everyone in your age cohort. And I feel a little guilty. I didn't do it to you. I didn't say, oh, I don't want Joey to ever have a house. I don't think kids need things. That wasn't my point, but it feels a little powerless as an individual to make that happen for a whole generation, and the generations coming, they're just excluded from what was a given for me. I was always going to grow up, go to college, get a husband, move to the suburbs, buy a house, have a nice car in the driveway. Like any reasonable person that grew up in my time frame believed that that was their destiny. Like you'd have to do something really wrong to screw that up. And now I think the answer is, Joey, for your generation, even if you do everything right, you didn't screw up a single thing, it's still like a 50-50 or less chance that you're going to make it.
Yeah. And I mean, I agree with what Isaacson is saying about meritocracy, but I think it's important to differentiate when it's being used correctly and when it's being used incorrectly. He is using it correctly. I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm saying when you hear this as sort of like a buzzy word during our current political climate, that they are using it incorrectly. Okay, they are not. That is not what meritocracy is. These people are being assigned things based on loyalty, and maybe not nepotism in this case, but it's based on what are you willing to do? Are you going to say yes to everything I say? Okay, great. Then you've earned your job. That's not merit-based. These people are not qualified for their jobs. So where's the merit other than a personal gain by, a singular individual?
Yeah, Joey, I appreciate you saying that. And Isaacson brought something to my attention that I did not understand or I had not thought of before. When the founding fathers were talking, and Jefferson, he was like, I do want this system where the best and the brightest rise up and they continue their education, and there will be this like intellectual ruling class sort of. And his friends were like, hey, yeah, geniuses are great, but they're not going to be running things. Everyone should have access to services. Everyone should be able to have an equal opportunity to use their skills in the best and possible way. And I think that really struck me. And I think Isaacson did a good job also of reminding me they were overthrowing the British system, which at the time it was hereditary. It was if you were of a certain bloodline, you automatically got all the perks, all the money, all the land,
merit.
all the people. They're like, it was completely out of your control. You had no agency to say, I'm going to rise in this society, because they're like, nope, if you don't have the right bloodline, you're out. And I thought that was just like a really interesting thing that I've taken for granted my whole life in the United States, that everyone, in my naiveness, everyone has an opportunity to obtain an education, to find a job, to find a loving spouse, or not, if they choose to not go that route, that everyone has an equal opportunity. And we sell that dream, but it's a lie. Like, I realize it now that it's like, oh, right, it's true for some, but not true for all. So let's stop pretending it's 100% applicable to any person who arrives here, that they have an equal shot at reaching the top.
Yeah, it's not. You're correct. I would agree with you that it's based on who you are. I think a hopeful thing is that we can see new politicians who are coming up, who are millennials. Okay, millennials for the win. That are really breaking what we think is possible in politics. Okay, there are some politicians like the mayor of New York City, Zohran Mamdani. Okay, millennial, who I wish was my mayor, but anyway. I think he's a great example of showing what politics can do. He was like, I have all these things I want to do, and guess what? I'm going to do them. And I did. It didn't take me that long because I know what I'm doing and I wanted to do it. And I think so we can see that this is, I think, fingers crossed, okay? I think this is going to be the new wave of politicians where they're coming in with just the best intentions and being like, I love where I live and I genuinely want to help my fellow Americans and make their lives better, because that is the point of a government, or it should be.
And Joey, thank you for taking us to that hopeful moment, because what we learned, or at least what I learned in reading this book from Isaacson, is that government is a social contract. Governments exist to serve the people who have come together in common to create common defense, common education, common healthcare, all of these things. And the fact that you said the mayor of New York is part of, I think, a new generation of politicians who say, hey, remember back in 250 years ago that we didn't like how things were going and we decided we were going to come together and change it because we had the power to do so with the consent of the people who we are representing? I'm going to make some changes. So Joey, I am leaving this conversation a little bit hopeful that there are still bright days ahead for the United States.
Exactly. And yes, and you know what? Read. That's what we are also trying to encourage. Well, we're always trying to encourage, but knowledge is such a powerful thing. And once you have it, they cannot take that away from you. It's in your brain. So read everything that you can, fiction and nonfiction. If you're only ever reading fiction, that's fine. Okay, I read mostly fiction. But you're gaining empathy, hopefully, depending on what you're reading. But that is such an important tool in a climate like this, where you can think out that, or be aware that it is not just you that the world revolves around. And in fact, does not revolve around you. So, like, be kind to other people and, like, think about what treatment they're enduring, how you can help by doing that, whether it's a personal thing, an individual way, or by your voting. That's super important.
And Joey, I'm going to leave it one last thing that you've also inspired me to do over the years that we've known each other. What are you going to stop doing? Even if you don't take another action, even if you're not doing a positive action, what are the things you're going to stop doing that will actually make the world a better place? And so I think that is something just that resonates with me. I'm going to stop assuming that I know what the Declaration of Independence says. I'm going to go to the document. I'm going to read it. I'm going to read a nonfiction book like we just read and educate myself on all of we didn't invent this idea of democracy. We didn't invent the United States. They were borrowing from other thought leaders of their time and of previous generations. And so when I kind of think I'm stuck with this thing, it's like, oh, do you need a revolutionary idea? Do you need to come up with something new? No, you need to read the history. You need to think about it. You need to lead with some empathy and join together with people who have a similar goal and make something happen. So Joy, I'm just going to leave it on that. Thank you I will be celebrating America at 250. I'm giving her a pass for the day. She has good intentions. I think she will get her shit together in the next year or two.
Oh wow, that's really positive. Can't celebrate
Maybe
you, America.
I'll split that years. I'm like, she'll get her shit together eventually.
I have hope that the United States will lock in and get it together, and I think the more knowledge that we all collectively gain, and even though social media sometimes can be a negative thing, I think being able to connect with other people and hear from them and hear their experiences is super integral to us moving forward as a united nation. So thank you so much for watching or listening to today's episode. And if you enjoyed it, please like, comment, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much. And follow us on TikTok at Extra Literary Affairs.
Yes, Joey, I'm looking forward to that. Next month, we will be doing something a little bit different for us. We are going to explore beach reads. So stay tuned for details on that and enjoy your summer. Bye. See you then. Bye.